Hi everyone, I hope you are doing great and having a fantastic week. I have a couple of videos that I want to share with you today. For today, I want to talk to you about inferring effectiveness, and it takes a lot for a research article to say that X causes Y. And so when we say that, we want to be looking at things like internal validity. And so if we're looking at cause and effect relationships, right, we need to be able to say that the independent variable caused the observed changes in the dependent variable in a research article that you're conducting, right? And so if you have a high degree of internal validity, then we can conclude that we have strong evidence of causality. If you have low internal validity, then there's some question about whether X causes Y. So the acronym that I like to use with internal validity that I used when I was in school is Mrs. Smith. And so MRSSMITH, and so maturation, regression towards the mean, selection of subjects, selection by maturation, mortality, instrumentation, testing, and history. So maturation, so this is the idea that participants' physiological processes could account for some of their behavior changes. So an example might be simply growing older, right? And so if you are conducting a study with kindergartners or young children, right, they, in between testing experiments, their scores may improve, not necessarily due to the intervention, but because they're getting older and they're maturing, kind of thing. So that, or they're growing in their cognitive development. So that is maturation. So that's one thing that you really want to account for when you're trying to limit your threats to internal validity. Regression towards the mean. So this is the idea that participants who have extreme scores when they're tested tend to have less extreme scores on subsequent retesting, regardless of the treatment effects or regardless of the intervention. So this phenomenon is the result of the fact that all measurement instruments are not perfectly reliable, right? And so as people take the test further and further, there's a natural regression towards the mean for even outliers. Selection of subjects. So this is a very big one, especially in social work, because we oftentimes have a hard time getting random groups and random assignments. A lot of times it's a sample of convenience. So any bias in selecting and assigning participants to groups may result in differences between the participants. And maybe there's differences that exist in one group that don't exist in another. So this threat to validity is great in quasi-experiments where the random assignment to treatment conditions is not possible. So again, selection of subjects in social work tends to often be one of the limitations in a research study. Selection by maturation. So this is the treatment and no treatment groups, are those similar at one point, would have grown apart, developed differently, even if no treatment was administered. So even though pretest scores may have been the same, groups that are not matched as well on other relevant variables may naturally become different over a period of time. So long-term Head Start research comparing middle class and disadvantaged children. So they may, again, more naturally become developed differently from each other, not necessarily due to the intervention. Mortality. So this is not the idea that people die necessarily. This is the idea of participants dropping out of a research study. And so they don't necessarily finish the experiment. So this may result in groups differing for unrelated reasons than the experiments. The problem is that the subjects who drop out of the study for whatever reason may be different than those who complete it. This may inflate, obscure, or confuse the treatment effects of interest. Instrumentation, right? So changes in the measurement procedures may result in differences between the comparison groups. So observers may become more experienced or less careless over time, which results in differences between the pre-test and post-test measurements that are unrelated to the treatment effects, right? And so if you have someone who's administering an instrument, that can also be instrumentation problems. So you want to make sure that you are asking the same question in the same way to all participants across treatment groups. So testing, so when participants are repeatedly tested, changes in test scores may be more due to practice or knowledge about the test procedure rather than any treatment effects. This is similar to maturation, except that the change is caused by the testing procedure itself. So the best example that I have of this one is the eye test. When you go to an optometrist, when they ask you to read the letters, if you memorize the letters the first time on the first eye, and then the next eye you're better at it because you memorize the letters. Kind of the same concept here. And then history. So this is extraneous events that happen in society. And so the example that I use for this is if you are doing a research study on first responders, and all of a sudden something like 9/11 happens, right? So that may significantly impact the treatment groups for first responders without you having ever done anything differently in your study. It could be a major event that happens in society or minor events occurring within the experimental situation. So these events may account for the participants' responses in the experiments more so than the treatment of interest. So again, things that happen outside of your control that can influence the treatment groups. So that's kind of a quick overview of Mrs. Smith, some of the threats to internal validity. So I hope this has been helpful for you, and I hope you guys are having a great week. Thank you so much.